Over the past 6 years, 75 house guests have loved, lied, and battled each other with one goal in mind: to win $500,000.
What's going on, guys? I'm BB Funerology, and today I'm going to be talking about something a little different than usual. I'm stopping to rank the old school Big Brother winners. And by old school, I mean seasons 2 through 7. I think season 7 is a nice little chapter end to the first era of Big Brother, with All Stars being a cherry on top. So full spoilers for seasons 2 through 7 coming ahead. And to be fair, the players lower on this ranking list, if I did a full 22 seasons ranking list, most of these players would be ranked in the top half. So all that said, let's hop right in. Coming in at number 6, and unfortunately in last place, is Big Brother 5 winner Drew Daniel. So the reason I have Drew so low on this list is because I feel like his win had a lot to do with luck through a big portion of the game. He made the wrong strategic moves at critical points in my opinion, and he just got kind of lucky with how things shook out later down the road. But the first 2 weeks for Drew were smooth sailing. Jace won the first HOH, and shortly after, Drew creates the 4 Horsemen alliance with him. Then the 4 Horsemen create a 5-person alliance with Marvin once he wins the second HOH, so he's covered there as well. Then third week, Drew wins HOH, and one of his nominations is Holly. Now Holly was Jace's showmance, and Scott flirted with her as well. I guess Drew was worried about a Yoko Ono breaking up his Beatles, so he put her on the block. And this fully turned Scott and Jace around. So this worked out kind of as a reset to the House Alliances, but I feel like if Scott or Jace wins the next HOH, there's a non-zero chance Drew goes home. Now, as bad of a move as this was, Drew did do really well with the aftermath. He buddies up with Diane and kind of sneaks away from his 4-person alliance as their target grew massively. He even participates in the 6-finger plan by winning veto and sending Jace home, so he did do a great job at reintegrating with the rest of the house. Then Drew gets lucky for a few more weeks when the twins make themselves the main target, but right as it becomes a 2-sided 3 versus 3 house, that's when Drew kicks his competitive game into high gear and starts winning everything. He wins the final 6 HOH during a double eviction. Although he nominates Diane, he tells her he's doing it to appear less together with her, which I think is the right idea, but she could have easily gone out this week if she didn't win veto. So he was gambling with his number 1 a little too soon. Then he works with Diane to get her the final 5 veto, forcing Nokomis to nominate Karen and sending her home. But to be clear, Diane came up with that plan. But then he wins final 4 and final 3 HOHs, and he sends Diane home with his final eviction, which I thought was his best game move because Diane was the strategic mastermind of that season, and I think she wins against him easily. So between his competition and his strategy, right at the end I think it was just enough to secure him the win. And I do really mean just enough. The final vote for the winner was a 3-3 tie, and then Will picked Drew, so it was a very close vote. Drew made a few strategic mistakes when he had power, but those mistakes were saved by his social prowess of being friendly with everyone and reducing his threat level. And he had a nice little competition streak right at the end. I just don't have the confidence that he'd be able to pull off the comp wins every single time or set himself up strategically to make it to the end very often. But it worked out for him with the twin twist that BB5 had set up for him. Dropping in at number 5 is Big Brother 3 winner Lisa Donahue, the original bitter juror winner. But to be fair, she's better than most of the other modern bitter juror winners. And honestly, I feel like I don't have too much to critique about Lisa. Comparing Lisa to other Big Brother winners here is a bit tough. It almost feels like comparing apples to oranges, because for the first 2 Big Brother seasons, there weren't really many alliances. Sure, there were a few pairs here and there, but for the most part, it was a group of individuals just trying to get to the end. The strategy and game flow just feels very different, and the only other winner, Dr. Will, actually came back, so we got to see him play both ways. But Lisa comes out of the gate hot by winning the first HOH. She gets off pretty clean by getting out Lori, who was loud and abrasive, and she didn't get much blood on her hands. Then she gets into a showmance with Eric, which was fine, I guess. He kept a shield in front of her and put her into an alliance with another showmance of Kiara and Roddy, and they were in the house for the first 3 weeks. She played a little bit lazy the first few weeks because she could, and this is basically the only criticism I really have about her game. When you're spending all your time with your showmance and not reinforcing your bonds with the other house guests, that's kind of bad, but next week things would change for her. In week 4, Jerry takes a stand and he puts up Lisa and Eric. Neither win veto, so one of them's going home. And this is where things get interesting, because her alliance votes are out, whereas the people against her voted her to stay because they wanted Eric gone. Kiara won the next HOH, and Lisa knew Kiara voted her out. So Lisa bit her tongue and played nice because she knew she had to make Kiara believe she was still on their side. And she does it perfectly because she stays off the block that week. Then when the house guests learn they have to vote someone back into the game between Amy and Lisa's showmance Eric, Lisa chooses Amy to come back because she knows if Eric came back into the house, she'd have to realign with Roddy and Kiara, and that just wasn't something that strategically was going to work for her. This is really when I realized that Lisa was there to play hard. Also, I have to shout out Lisa and Danielle using sign language on a few occasions to talk strategy both silently and right under other people's noses. Such awesome gameplay moves, which I'm surprised we haven't seen this again since. But a few more weeks go by and Lisa uses her social game and doesn't get nominated again until the final four, thanks to Marcellus not using the veto on himself at the final five.
Use the veto, fool!
Sorry, had to mention it. And she basically moseys up to Danielle, and she becomes Danielle's number 3 because, well, she didn't realize how tight Danielle and Jason were. But it didn't matter because when she needed it most, whether she knew it or not, she won the final 3 HOH and went on to win the game. I think Lisa could have been higher on this list if she had won any other season, but it's tough standing next to Danielle Reyes and being in a season of Big Brother, which as a show and a format was just very underdeveloped. Landing at number 4 is Mike Boogie. So Mike Boogie is an interesting one because this guy played on 3 different seasons, so we got to see his game 3 different times. And unlike Dr. Will, his first season didn't go so hot. He went out 4th and didn't hide Chilltown at all, so as far as changing his legacy goes, he could only go up from there. But then All-Stars comes around. The first 4 weeks of All-Stars, Season 6 members won the HOH. Each and every one of these weeks, the Season 6 Alliance should have targeted Chilltown. Not only was Will the only winner, but Will played one of the most savage games in history. And they all saw it, so they should have been targeting Chilltown. But between Will and Boogie, they convinced Kaser, James, and Janelle not to put them up. Eventually, Janelle puts up Erica and Boogie because Will was able to work some magic behind the scenes. But Mike won veto that week and saved himself, Will, and Erica in the process. Also, they were able to break the Season 6 alliance by pulling James off and forming the Legion of Doom with Chilltown, Danielle, and James. And this was just in time, too, because once Season 6 lost, Danielle won, and she targeted the Season 6 alliance. Then later, George won HOH during a double eviction, which was chaos, because George was a loose cannon with no ties to anyone, and he could have gone in any direction. And then George considered putting up Will as a pawn post-veto, and Mike Boogie, seconds beforehand, changes his mind, and Howie goes home in the double eviction. Boogie wins final 7 HOH, and he blindsides James, who was in his alliance, so he never had the chance to defend himself. Then Danielle is pissed, and he convinces Erica to take Danielle out, who is her close friend, which is pretty epic. Then at this point, the only people left, Boogie, Will, Erica, Janelle, and Chicken George. And Boogie and Will convince each and every one of them that they're the secret third member of Chilltown, and they're all fully on board. Mike wins final 4 HOH, so Janelle wins a veto and she can't evict him. Then Erica gets Janelle to evict Will, which I think was probably really good for Mike's game if he wanted to win. Then at the final 3, Mike throws the final 3 HOH part 1, which randomly makes Janelle drop by accident.
What? I told you, Janelle. What?
So, random, but flashy nonetheless. Then he takes home the final 3 HOH, and then he takes home the win. And I'll say, Mike Boogie played the second best game in All-Stars because Will's ability to convince people to do things for him is, well, out of this world. I think Boogie on his own without Will is very similar to what we see in Big Brother 14. He doesn't quite get to the end and doesn't have the persuasion skills, but I think him and Will are just an extremely dangerous duo, and Mike is the sidekick. But between getting George to nominate Howie and getting Erica to nominate Danielle, Mike Boogie is no slouch when it comes to Big Brother, and he played a great game. But I don't see him doing that too often without Will being there to give him the assist. Before we head into the top 3, remember this is my rankings list, and we're probably going to have varying lists to a degree, so let me know what order you'd put your top 6 in and why. Starting off the top half of the old school winners, and at number 3 is Big Brother 4 winner, Jun Song. Jun is definitely one of my favorite winners in this list because she invented the floater game. I mean the true definition of the word floater, not the overused botched version that some players refer to today. Jun deliberately floated in the middle of 2 alliances and made sure both sides were always targeting each other before they were targeting her. And I loved her kitchen strategy of being the house cook because it's where people go. Everyone always moves through the kitchen, and so she gets to talk to everyone by staying there for large portions at a time. I'm surprised no one else has taken this approach since, or at least explicitly said so. Yeah, we've had people who cook a lot, but no one that said my strategy is to cook a lot so I can talk to everyone like Jun did. Jun also, in my opinion, was the best in the house at getting over her breakup with her ex. Not only that, but she was able to hide it pretty well by fighting with him, but also understanding that even with the fights that they were still working together. Jun survived the first few weeks of the game pretty easily. The basic setup was the original 8 members versus the exes. Everyone on both sides was too busy targeting each other, and Jun just snuck through. She had both sides thinking they were mostly good with her, till Allison won. Allison put Jun on the block because Allison wanted Dana gone, so she only went up there because she would have used the veto on Dana, but Jun got out scot-free by campaigning and securing her votes, and Dana goes home unanimously. A few weeks later, G makes himself a huge target by making the whole house eat peanut butter and jelly, just so he could have the veto, and then later he won a food competition the same week. Jun had no trouble cutting him loose once he became a liability to her game. In fact, she was the one who nominated him at the final 5. Then Jun throws the final 3 HOH to Allison, so she has to evict Robert, and he goes to the jury house and taints it against her. This is so wild to me. Who throws the final 3 HOH? The risk here is so high. I cannot believe she did it, but she did. Jun really did play a flawless floater game, and she ended up next to the only other floater at the final 2, which feels poetic in a sense. And then she took home the win next to potentially the only other person on the cast possible for her to secure the win next to. She knew what she needed to make happen to get the win, and she did it, and it was very impressive. Sliding in at the number 2 spot is Big Brother 6 winner Maggie. Maggie's a tough one, because she was so firmly on the side I rooted against each time I watched this season, but I have to recognize the good gameplay. She has some lows, which are pretty low moments, and normally I'd say these were the moves of a bad player, but she has some highs that are so impressive, I still to this day don't quite understand how she was able to pull off what she did. So the first 3 weeks were actually, I think, Maggie at her lowest level of impressiveness. Week 3, Kaser wins HOH, and he puts up Maggie, and then he backdoors Eric. But after the veto this week, Maggie and Eric are on the block, and Maggie pretty much lays down and just takes whatever outcome the house guests throw at them. I know Maggie and Eric knew each other outside the house, so it wasn't quite the same as rolling over and dying to any normal house guests, but still, it was quite weird to see her essentially be okay with going home, even though it didn't quite happen. But I wish she would have just fought more for herself that week. After this week, though, it's all uphill for Maggie because she wins the next HOH week, and she gets out Kaser, who in my opinion, is basically the brains of the Sovereign Six. It was a great move because without him, she's able to crumble the Sovereign Six alliance. Howie wins the next HOH, and in one conversation, Maggie secures her own safety, which was wild after the previous week, but also gets Howie to promise to target James and Sarah for being floaters, which, to be clear, James and Sarah were firmly on the Sovereign Six's side. This felt like mind control. It seems so far-fetched that Howie would go for this, let alone staying to his word once saying it, but yeah, Maggie made that happen on her own. Then Kaser comes back in, Jennifer betrays him, and Maggie is able to slide just far enough back down in the target list that when Janelle wins the HOH in the double, Jennifer's the one that goes home. Then her side wins a few more HOHs in a row, just enough for her to slide back down the target list once more, so that when Howie eventually wins HOH, Howie's too fixated on the pair of Beau and Yvette to take care of Maggie. Then right as it gets to the endgame, April and Yvette turn on each other, and Maggie is able to stoke the fire just enough for them to be pissed at each other, without either of them being mad at Maggie. And I think this was perfect jury management, because it sent out April praising Maggie and hating Yvette, which must have done wonders for her in the jury house. As far as big moves goes, I feel like Maggie has the biggest move of convincing Howie to put up James and Sarah for being floaters. Not only did she ruin Howie and James' Sovereign Six alliance, but that baggage must have carried over into Season 7, effectively destroying the alliance twice. This was a wild move that I don't think many players would have even thought of in the moment. Any decent player could have deflected and thrown members of their own alliance under the bus to save their own skin, but to convince your opponent to put up the member of their own alliance, very deserving of the number 2 old school winner spot. But coming in at number 1, you already know, is Dr. William Kirby. Like Mike Boogie, Dr. Will played more than one season, so we have a lot more data to draw from when it comes to giving him a rank. Honestly, if we lived in a world where Will never came back for All-Stars or any other subsequent seasons, he'd probably be a little lower on this list. In Big Brother 2, he played a great game, but probably not a number 1 winner type of game. However, his game in Big Brother 7 is one of, if not, the strongest games of all time. The way he had a stranglehold on that season was insane. Plus, he was the only winner on that season, so he should have been taken out very early, but he just wasn't. He was just a couple different competition outcomes from becoming the first and only ever 2-time Big Brother winner, and oh man, he would have deserved such a title. In Big Brother 2, he was the self-proclaimed puppet master the first week until Chilltown was blindsided at the first eviction. So he starts off this season on the back foot. Both Shannon and Boogie as Alliance members are taken out the third and fourth weeks, leaving Will by himself. After that though, Will turned up his game. He cracked the majority alliance and made them turn on themselves. He set up the major targets ahead of him for weeks to come. He made promises along the way to secure his safety, which he reminded us in the diary room time and time again he would betray people as soon as he got the chance if it was better for his game. He pretty much implemented the anyone but me strategy like Sandra from Survivor, and it really worked and got him to the end. He also told people he was going to cheat, lie, and steal, and do whatever it took to get to the end every chance he got. So when he got to the end and it was a vote between him and Nicole, I think a lot of them decided at least Will owned what he was going to do, unlike Nicole who claimed to be an honest game player and then stabbed people in the back. Will's diary room sessions all season long were pretty great, and he kept telling us that he'd stab anyone in the back and have no problem doing so. With all this, he went into All-Stars as a massive target. How he got past week 1 is beyond me. I've hit a lot of these points already talking about Boogie's Big Brother 7 game, but damn, the way he swayed Janelle for the first 60 days of the season are insane. Janelle won HOH twice in the first 4 weeks, and both times she should have put up Chilltown, but Will convinced her not to touch him either time. The second time Janelle broke a promise to James in the process, and James decided to go behind the season 6 alliance's back and make an alliance with no one else but Dr. Will, of course. And Will's I hate you all speech was stupidly entertaining, but it also made the target so big on his back, I feel like it became a situation where everyone just wanted him in the house to be a target in front of themselves. Then Janelle won HOH in week 6, and he convinced her to backdoor Marcellus, who as far as Janelle knew, was Janelle's best friend in the house. But to be fair, Marcellus was totally going to betray Janelle the first chance he got, so this actually was good for Janelle, just not quite in the ways Will was pitching it to her. Will's only downfall was not sticking close enough to Janelle in the final 4 week when Erica snuck in and convinced Janelle to turn on Chilltown. I think if Will just spent more time with her and didn't let Erica get that much alone time with Janelle, he would have gotten through that week too. Even a Dr. Will or Boogie veto win that week would have probably landed Will as the first 2-time winner. He's the best old school winner and the best old school player for that matter. He is the face of Big Brother, and he keeps coming back on the show for a reason. And Dr. Will gets the Big Brother crown as far as this tier list goes. If you made it this far, consider subscribing because I'm making a whole lot of Big Brother content just like this one. And if you wouldn't mind leaving a like, I'd really appreciate it. It does help a lot. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.